Previously on the Scream Retrospective, Welshy reviewed Scream 1. Now back to the Scream Retrospective.
Well, that was Scream 1. Scream 2 finds our heroes... Hello?
Hello, Welshy.
Hi. Who is this?
You tell me.
Well, I have no idea.
Scary night, isn't it? With all the murders and all, it's like something out of
It's the middle of the day. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun's still out.
What? Oh, right.
Yeah. Oh. So who are you?
The question isn't who I am. The question is, where am I?
So, where are you?
Your front porch.
I don't have a front porch. It's more like a garden.
For the love of fuckers. I'm outside your door, okay?
Oh, that's great. What do you want me to do about it?
That's the original part.
Is that supposed to make sense? What, you want me to open my door to check you're outside, calling your bluff?
Uh-huh.
Only a complete idiot would do something like that. And where can I find a complete idiot around here? Hold on, I got another call. Hello?
You cold?
Go away. Alright, fine, I'll call your bluff. Come on, Rob. This could be dangerous. Okay, little buddy. Confession time. One of us has got to stay and look after this room. One of us has got to go out there and see if there is someone outside. Now, if you bear with me, I think I've come up with a fair way of deciding who should stay and who should go. It's based on age, usefulness, cuteness, and the most important thing, the communication factor. You know, you've got to be relied on to get back to someone as soon as they ask you a question, correct? Correct. Good man. I knew you'd understand. Good luck. Hey, I can always buy another one.
You'll see him in your nightmares, you'll see him in your dreams. He'll appear out of nowhere, but he ain't what he seems. You'll see him in your head on the TV screen. Hey buddy, I'm warning you to turn it on. He's a ghost, he's a god, he's a man, he's a guru. You're one microscopic cog in his catastrophic plan, designed and directed by his red right hand.
Of all the things in the world, I kind of wish I had a lock on my door right now. Hey, speaking of which... Perfect! Man, I'm thirsty. Just in case. Hi! I'm Welshy. But you should already know that by now. And barring any storyline interruptions, at least not for the next 30 minutes, hopefully, I can get back to talking about Scream. So after they released the original Scream in 1996, the slasher genre was suddenly cool again. Or should that be profitable? And as in the past, a whole host of new slasher films started to appear, all attempting to emulate the success of Scream with the same kind of formula, be it the same self-referential style of humour, the same sort of mystery, or the same type of mood. They didn't succeed, and in some cases, people view Scream as one of the darkest eras in horror. I respectfully disagree with those opinions. I mean, it was only nearly 10 years later that people were accusing Saw of exactly the same thing, starting a dark era in horror, this time with torture porn. Scream also seems to have coined the term meta. Now, back in 1997, I visited a lot of message boards. I was a part of a Scream message board. It was my first experience and introduction into internet forums, all that sort of thing. Nobody was using that term. It seems to have been thrown around a lot more recently. So it seems to me that Scream was meta before meta was even a word. Which begs the question, what does meta actually mean? And no, I can't be bothered to look it up.
Scream was a surprise success at the box office, and with that success, Dimension were quick to sign up a sequel, and exactly 1 year later, Scream 2 was released, bringing back every major character from the first film, including the writer Kevin Williamson and director Wes Craven. In fact, nearly everyone who worked on Scream behind the scenes was back for the sequel. The story also manages to move several of the characters forward and call back to events that happened in Scream 1, Sydney's relationship with Cotton and Dewey's relationship with Gale being good examples. Set 2 years after the original, with Sydney and Randy now studying at Windsor College, Gale's a successful reporter and writer after the publication of her book, which she titled The Woodsboro Murders. Dewey on leave from the force due to a severed nerve thanks to the knife injury he sustained in his back at the end of the first film, and for the first time becoming a prominent character, Liev Schreiber playing Cotton Weary, the man Sydney originally accused of murdering her mother and had sent to prison. Again, was actually too young to see Scream 2 in the cinema, so I didn't get a chance to experience the film with an audience, but the hysteria that had been built up for the release of this film was like something I'd never seen before. Commercials, interviews, shots, shorts, trailers, features, The Mask. Scream was everywhere by this point, and with the release and the success of shows like Dawson's Creek and Buffy, the whole thing seemed to be packed with people who appeared in all these shows. It was almost like a who's who of the people who were on TV back in the day, and it kind of makes me sad for some of those shows. Not all of them, of course. Nostalgia.
Now I know you're probably expecting a Doug cameo roundabout now because I said that, but I'm not important enough to get a cameo from Doug. No, I'm serious. I'm not. Can we move along?
Scream 2 was released under a buzz of anticipation. It was a guaranteed hit no matter what the critics thought, and had a huge number of the current TV stars wanting to be a part of it.
Despite having a few more obvious flaws, Scream 2 is my favourite of the franchise at the moment. The only thing that lets it down for me is the killer reveal, the last scene basically, which is a shame and it's something I will cover. Everything else, apart from one excruciating singing sequence, which again I will cover, sadly, is really, really good. And Scream 2, to me, does have the best death sequence in the Scream series. It's also got some great stalker moments and some great tension moments. Taking out Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I'd say this is Kevin Williamson at his best, and Wes Craven at his best too.
The film opens outside a movie theatre where we meet two Windsor students, Maureen Evans, played by Jada, she was then Pinkett, and her boyfriend Phil Stevens, played by Omar Epps, and they're heading in to watch Stab, a movie that's been adapted from the book The Woodsboro Murders, written by Gale Weathers, which details the killings from the first film. It's already less than a minute in and we have the surreal experience with the film becoming almost self-referential to its own original. This is actually a really clever way of keeping the movie within the movie dialogue real, which is something that was one of Scream's biggest strengths. Now, as this is a sneak preview for special ticket holders, every attendee gets a Ghostface costume complete with fake knife, and the audience is full of horror nuts, with gags and stunts being performed all over the showroom. The film starts and we see Heather Graham playing the role of Casey Becker, the role Drew Barrymore played in the first film.
Confused?
The scene plays out very much like it did in the original Scream, but I love the little cliché nods that Williamson and Craven add to the scene. Examples being the thunder outside and the even bigger cliché of having the victim either naked, semi-naked, or in the shower. So many horror films have a scene like this, and it's fun to see the makers poke fun at it by including it in the movie's movie. It's also a chance for Williamson to put himself into the role of the horror movie watcher, as he has Maureen shout out some of the things I know people have shouted out while watching these movies.
Bitch, hang the phone up and star 69 his ass. Damn.
Of course, there are some other things people like to shout out while watching these films.
This film is awful. The lowest form of shit.
But to each his own. Maureen isn't a big fan of horror movies, or being scared, and leaves to get some popcorn. All over the theatre, people are dressed up as Ghostface, messing around and having fun. But when she returns to the showing, Phil thinks now would be a good time to pull a scare.
What an ass. That's just what I said.
Phil goes to the bathroom to relieve himself, while Maureen heads back to the showroom, taking his spot just as we see Casey's final moments begin on the screen. In the bathroom, Phil comes face to face with two ghost faces, both using the urinals to relieve themselves, and so, unable to hold it, he heads into the stall, only to be distracted by some strange mutterings coming from the neighbouring stall.
Veering off topic for a second here, I've always wondered myself if the mumblings in that stall are in any sort of way a small nod to Black Christmas. If you've ever watched the original Black Christmas, a really good film by the way, the killer will ring the house and make noises and say things and obscenities and makes some really hideous noises down the phone to the students. And I've always wondered if this is like a small little nod to that. I might be completely wrong though, so feel free to correct me if I am.
Leaning in for a closer look, a new Ghostface spears his head and ear, resulting in Phil's death, which goes unheard by the two urinating ghosts. Back at the screening, Casey's being stalked through the house and makes her escape, just like she did in the first film. And with Maureen willing her on, a masked figure wearing Phil's coat sits next to her.
Baby, give it up.
And in another delicious slice of irony, Maureen seems to make a commentary on her own fate.
It looks like she's about to get it. Want some popcorn?
Don't mind if I do.
As the whole screening watches the final attack of Casey, Maureen hides against Phil, only to pull away and notice blood on her hands. Before she has time to react, the killer pulls a knife and stabs her as she stares in disbelief. With the whole screening going crazy as they watch the killer on screen putting an end to Casey, Maureen stumbles around mortally wounded. Surrounded by Ghostface masks and clearly hurt, she can do nothing as the killer stabs her again and again, with no one actually realising what's going on. After a final stab, she uses her last ounce of strength to climb up in front of the screen to show the idiots in the audience that this is very real, and after a final scream of pain with the Ghostface mask imposed large from behind, she falls backwards, dead.
So I've always felt that this first scene is a really good example of writing to audience expectations. Because with the release of Scream 2, everybody wanted to see Ghostface. He's one of the prime reasons for coming to see this film. People want to see the Ghostface mask again. It's like when you go to see a Halloween film, you want to see Michael Myers. You go to a Friday the 13th film, you want to see Jason Voorhees. People wanted to see Ghostface. So, in the very first scene, Kevin Williamson gives us Ghostface. He gives us a lot of Ghostface, but then smartly pulls back. And you don't really get to see Ghostface again until the end of the movie. There are a few, fleeting appearances here and there, but he doesn't really come out on force until the final act. This is a really good thing because it doesn't ruin it. His appearances actually mean something because you want to see him again. He isn't in it all the time. This is a mistake Scream 3 made, in my opinion. And that is something I will eventually cover.
Moving forward to the next morning, we're reintroduced to Sidney Prescott, now in college, and she seems to have moved on with her life and put the events of the previous film behind her, despite the occasional prank call.
Hello, Sydney.
Yes?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Who is this?
You tell me.
Corey Gillis, 555-0176.
She manages to brush these off like they mean nothing. We're also introduced to Sydney's roommate Hallie, played by Elsa Neal, and thanks to a quick change of channel, we see that Cotton Weary, the man Sydney accused of murdering her mother in the first film, is now free, and making regular appearances on TV shows trying to rake in some money for his false imprisonment. Through the girls' conversation, we also learn that Hallie has been trying to get Sydney involved with campus activities, most notably trying to get her signed up to one of the sororities, Delta Lambda Zeta.
Now, I'm not American, as you can tell, so I have no idea what these things are, but from the looks of it, it just looks like they involve massive amounts of drinking. So get in there, my girl.
The conversation doesn't remain casual for long as Sydney and Hallie watch the news and learn of the deaths of Maureen and Steve at the preview of Stab. With an air of inevitability, Sydney heads out to find Randy, but is ambushed by reporters along the way. We arrive at Randy's film theory class, which introduces us to Sarah Michelle Gellar as Cece Cooper and Timothy Oliphant's Mickey, as well as a little cameo from Joshua Jackson. In the midst of the class, the whole room has another interesting conversation, this time on the theory of movie sequels.
Are you suggesting that someone's trying to make a real-life sequel?
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck.
No.
The class debates sequels of all sorts, from horror to action,
Aliens. Far better than the first.
to drama.
The Godfather, Part 2.
Yet, there is always one line here that's always annoyed me.
Aliens is a classic, okay? Get away from her, you bitch. I believe the line is stay away from her, you bitch.
No! No, it's not! Watch!
Get away from her, you bitch!
I've never understood why he says that line. And if anybody out there does, please, tell me.
Sydney arrives shortly and Randy leaves with her after noting how he would make a sequel different from the original.
I'd let the geek get the girl.
Just like the first film where Randy reeled off the rules of surviving a horror movie, I just love this scene for its sheer cheek in attacking horror sequels. He doesn't go after horror in general, but Randy does note that the entire horror genre was destroyed by sequels, which is again a funny comment for a character to say when they're actually in a horror sequel. Sydney is convinced the killings are linked to them, while Randy is much more dismissive, putting it down to coincidence. It's at this point that most of the principal cast start to introduce themselves, as we meet Sydney's new boyfriend Derek, played by Jerry O'Connell, and with the media circus in full swing, the reintroduction of Gale Weathers, now with new hair and a new cameraman, Joel. Gale herself has become a celebrity due to the events of the first film and wards off attention from a number of reporters, most notably Debbie Salt, played by Laurie Metcalf, who seems to view Gale as her idol. With a press conference held, we meet the, I guess, heads of Delta Lambda Zeta, Sister Lois and Sister Murphy, who let our happy band know that there's a party tonight and Sydney's invited.
Yeah, in any other movie, these guys would be so dead.
As the girls wander off, Sydney spots a nearby figure who turns out to be Dewey, who heard about the killings and caught the first plane down, having become almost a surrogate big brother to Sydney and Randy since the end of Scream 1. Sydney and Dewey reconnect, with Dewey warning her about the possible dangers from people in her life, and after Dewey departs, Sydney is approached by Gale, who, in typical Gale fashion, attempts to use the situation to her advantage and brings Sydney face to face for the first time since she testified against him in court with Cotton Weary, in an impromptu interview that Sydney knew nothing about. I just love leaving these scenes, as he's playing a guy who wants to be viewed as a good guy and the man of the people, but he's clearly out for himself and playing it up to the cameras because he believes the world owes him something. His little glance at the camera after his speech just sells it.
I'd just like to say that I forgive and forget. Just like you, I'd like to get back on with my own life.
Sydney really doesn't like this and responds in a way Gale is all too familiar with. Humiliated, Gale stalks off and runs into Dewey, and we see a much tougher side to Dewey as he confronts Gale about how she wrote his character in the book and tells her a few home truths about her as a person.
What I think is that you're a money-hungry, fame-seeking, and forgive me for saying mediocre writer. Who's got a cold storage shed where her heart should be. No offense intended.
Ooh. I think it's safe to say that Gale didn't call much after the events of the first film.
So at this point, all the players have been introduced, and now it's about giving the audience what they came in for. A Ghostface attack. While Sydney and Harry arrive at the party promised earlier, we switch to Sorority House Omega Beta Zeta, with Cece home alone as sober sister, watching TV and chatting to a friend. A call from someone she believes to be her boyfriend interrupts her phone conversation. But after switching over, she learns this isn't her drunk boyfriend.
Okay, Ted, you sound loaded. What's up?
Who's Ted?
This scene is a departure from the original Casey scene, as the caller doesn't really attempt to be flirtatious or misleading, signalling to everybody that this isn't Billy Loomis or Sue Marker back from the grave. This is a whole new Ghostface. That message gets across pretty quickly though. Cece thinks she hears something upstairs and does the smart thing. She calls security and she leaves the house. Sadly, her connection's about as good as mine in work, and her signal is so bad she has to go back into the house so she can be heard. The upstairs occupant turns out to be Cece's housemate, but in her interruption, someone sneaks in unnoticed. And after her housemate departs, another call freaks Cece out, and she sets the house alarm before beginning to move slowly around the house, while a film plays in the background. Exactly the same as the first movie. The tension builds to another call. And an attack, and this Ghostface isn't fucking round, making the cliched mistake of running up the stairs of this insanely large house. She eventually runs out of steps, and Ghostface sends her crashing through a window before stabbing her twice and finally throwing her off the roof to her death. They just kill Buffy. Back at the party, Mickey and Derek arrive late. And Mickey immediately gets into a sequel discussion with Randy, citing Empire Strikes Back as a superior sequel, and earns major points for me for claiming the Ewoks blow. The happy mood doesn't last though, as police arrive at Omega Beta Zeta and the party files out due to all the activity. Little touches here like Debbie getting the scoop on Gale because of Gale's late arrival, Gale's threat to Joel, as well as Dewey's anger towards her, all come out in little glances, which only adds to the tension and suspicion. Back at Delta, Derek tells Sydney to get her jacket so he can take her home, but just before she leaves, the phone rings and Sydney, I'm assuming in an attempt to show she's trying not to let these events get to her, answers it.
Hello, Sydney. Remember me?
Hearing this voice from the past, it's still an awesome voice by the way, triggers another Ghostface attack as Sydney avoids his charge and his knife.
I like that. It's not as good as Dewey's scream from the first film, but I still love that expression.
Sydney manages to get outside, only to run into Derek, who goes back into the house looking for the killer. Dewey arrives seconds later and stalks the halls, finding Derek in the hallway bleeding from the arm. Alive, but the killer's disappeared, leaving only Lois and Murphy looking on. This final shot says so much with so little. Sydney is once again completely alone and can trust no one.
He's a ghost, he's a god, he's a man, he's a guru. You're one microscopic cog in his catastrophic plan, designed and directed by his red right hand.
Smarty.